Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis. Today we have a special guest, a repeat guest. He's going to give us an update on how things are going with his case. Well, the case is over, but he's going to tell us a little bit more about the opioid epidemic. Bruce Boise worked for nearly 24 years in the pharmaceutical industry, first as a hospital representative, then as a sales manager in the Great Lakes region. After losing his job as a whistleblower, we like that. He spent portions of the next 17 years working with the United States Justice Department on two separate False Claims Act cases against his former employer, Cephalon Teva, a neurobiotech company. Bruce, welcome to Politics Done Right again. How are you doing today?
Hey, very good. Thanks for having me again.
Well, look, we want, first of all, let's get started because you actually wrote a book that detailed this entire stuff. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book.
I wrote the book. Well, first of all, my lead counsel, Peter Chatfield, wanted me to write the book for like 10 years before. Mm-hmm. And he said, you really have to write the book. You got to tell the story of what went on and how you persevered and what occurred, but you were successful, and that's important. And so he said, you really want to write a book about what a whistleblower would be, what it is, sort of the inside scoop of that. And also to talk about how the opioid crisis came about. And so that's really the reason I initially started to write the book. But now, as the book's been out, I'm doing so much in patient advocacy and involved. There's so much to be involved in to help in the opioid crisis, as little as I can, as much work as I can put into it to help in, like, for example, just getting the information out to even local addiction centers and national. I talk in a national level as well to Fed Up and to other national organizations. So that's sort of what my role is now. But as it started with Peter's suggestion was to get the book out for describing a whistleblower.
So your book pretty much explains to folks, hey, you can be a whistleblower. It's an important thing to do that, but recognize that there are some repercussions for doing that. Yeah. But, you know, it's many times it's a moral thing, and absent you doing it, the same crap goes on and on and on.
You know, and I'll tell you, Alberto, this is sort of a, you know, you have careers, and then you have like life careers, like where you wind up working for somebody and you do this job and you make money and you get through life. This has been a change for me where it's been a real cause, a real need area that I see where more people need to join to help. And so that's what it's become now for me, that I'm pretty involved in it most of the time.
Bruce, when your guy contacted me, I said, you know what? He said, you know, he kind of said something similar to that. And then my thing was like, I know exactly how you feel, because you went from being this executive at this company to now you've changed profession. You're an advocate, you're a consumer advocate. You wrote a book to tell folks how, you know, same thing I went through from having a software company to being an advocate for progressive issues. So, I mean, many times people don't understand the change, and the change itself, how not only difficult, but rewarding. Because yes. I know that right now, tell me about how rewarding this is to you, that you just know you're actually helping people to make a better life for themselves.
Oh my gosh. Probably the most significant thing that comes out of it is that, you know, I do my daily activity. Like, I'm down in the Key West area now, visiting friends. And I went out to dinner, and the manager of the restaurant, hey, we haven't seen you in a long time. What have you been doing? And I said, I wrote a book. And they said, wrote a book. And most people didn't know that I was involved in the opioid crisis, and I was involved in cases and wore a wire and all that stuff, because you don't talk about that.
Right.
And so I go, well, it's like now I'm really busy with patient advocacy and things like that. And he turned around and he said, I'd love to get one of your books. And And I said, well, I think I got one I'm driving. I got one in the truck. And I said, I got one I'll just give you one. He said, okay. So he's at the podium where he's supposed to be for the manager running a restaurant. He's reading it. He comes over and he goes, you know, I lost a relative, 23 years old, athletic injury, on fentanyl, got addicted, finally overdosed. And you hear those stories all the time, that when you start talking about what you're doing now, and it just rolls into this, they tell you about who, you know, what incident was, what family member may have died, or even worse, what occurs as far as the collateral damage. It's like the mom overdosed, but the father and the kids separated and now are not together anymore. The family's gone. And so you run across those kind of things, and you know you're on the right path of doing good work when you run across those kind of stories almost all the time. It's amazing to me how much this has affected our country.
Let me tell you something, Bruce. America is a country which it's individualism, not because people want to be individualistic, but it's what it's preached to people, that they so often suffer in silence. We have a culture that suffers in silence. And books like yours and the work that you do tell people it is okay to open up. I have relatives right now, family members right now, who I know have particular health issues, etc. And they would rather deal with a whole lot on their own, as opposed to saying, you know what, if you just get help here, things can be so much better, not only for you, but for the family in general. So what you're doing is important work.
I so believe that, and for you too, because as you're having me on, it helps me get the message out. And that's good stuff that you're doing, so that, and all it is, like somebody goes into a doctor's office and they don't want to tell the doctor what's going on, but they've got an idea, but they won't ask the question. Ask the question, write the questions down, ask the question. It's not rocket science with this. You know, the doctor's there and the nurses are there to try to figure it out. I'm going through that with my brother right now. He doesn't want to talk to him about it. And it's like, all you got to do is, and all of a sudden after 2 months of treatment, he's better. And it's like, you don't have to suffer in silence. All you got to do is ask that question, step out of that. You don't have to be this suffering person. You can resolve it. And so it's true. And that's that optimistic view I have in life. That's also true with the opioid crisis. We dare not lose our focus in all these other issues that we have. Now, the pandemic is horrible. I get it. And 500,000 people have died, and it's bad. But you also can't stop a virus, and you can pay attention to cardiovascular disease, oncology issues, and you know, do your pre-medical work, so that those workups, so that, you know, patients don't get caught with stage 4 cancer. They catch it earlier, right? And those are the questions. Those are the simple questions to get people to do. That's the patient advocacy part of it.
You know, so before I want to kind of explore that a little bit further, but tell me, what's the state, as you see it, of the opioid crisis? You know that a lot of the companies that you know about, you know, they tried to put that under the ground. They tried not to make it seem as bad as it was. I know there are a lot of suits that been settled right now. What's the state of the opioid epidemic right now?
I think it breaks down into a couple different parts, right? So one, you got the pharmaceutical industry and their role in how they off-labeled the opioid products, whether that's a fentanyl product or whether that was OxyContin. And those folks have been fined, and they've moved on because they sign off that no one can come back after them. Mm-hmm. And some of the fines are substantial, and they're finally getting to that. Also the distributors. So they've gone after the distributors. So big drug company distributors have been fined as well. Also, there are consultants. So pharmaceutical management consultant, Kinsey is the one that's been fined 500, I think it was $573 million. They were doing the consulting and marketing for OxyContin and Purdue. Those are all in place and those are moving along. The issue with that is that we cannot just forget about that they did that, because greed leads to fraud, leads to patient death. You have to still be an advocate and still pay attention to what's going on, not only with pharmaceutical companies, but also the FDA.
Now, so in effect, do you feel like between the government and these pharmaceutical companies, you think that the resolution is fair, or, you know, it's always hard to think that, well, the resolution with the corporation is fair, but what's your thoughts on that?
I know they're being hammered pretty hard right now. The trouble is that I've been on that side of it where I'm the plaintiff and they're the defendant. And I'll just say this, their defense is a militant defense. In other words, they're not giving anybody up. They're not giving anybody's up. And so you've got to be able to keep track of what goes on. And if, let's say a company X winds up having an opioid they want to get to market, well, just don't let them go to market and start all over again with another opioid just to solve their bottom line. Pay attention to it as an advocate, with different people, like, for example, PROP, physicians for responsible opioid prescribing, those folks that are involved in that, to still be involved in that and still keep track of that. Because there's one aspect of that, and then the other is that, we got drugs coming in that are so cheap, the fentanyl product or any of that they add to, whatever's on the street, which is another issue by itself, right? You almost get addicted by a prescription, like the one kid that had a sports industry injury, and then he winds up having a fentanyl product, then all of a sudden he gets addicted. Well, that kind of situation can occur, but it's not as relevant. Maybe it's still relevant, but
right.
you have so much coming into the country as a fentanyl product. And in fact, methamphetamine is a big issue now coming into the East Coast areas. So you get those, that's why I said there's sort of two different divergent issues coming on now. But you still can't take your eye off the ball with it. You still have to be cognizant of what goes on, and people, bad people do bad things. So.
All right. Two more questions. The first one I'm asking you, and the first one is actually you. But the first, so be thinking about the last one, which is, what didn't I ask you that I wanted to ask, that you wanted me to ask you? But we're going to hold off on that one. I just want you to think about that in the background, because I remember the last time. But anyhow, let's go. let's go ahead and say, with after writing this book, you've changed your life. You're now doing a lot of what I call altruistic things that are helping people. Give me some specifics as far as what you're going to be doing, not only what you've done, what you're going to be doing going forward. What I want to do is show people that if more of us take interests in these types of things, there's so many people that want to do other things, but are so scared to say, I am going to break from this and I'm going to start doing this altruistic thing that I've always wanted to do. And the opportunity is there. Take it. Go ahead.
One of the fascinating things is the speaking engagements, or the things that I do that are, you set off to say, oh, I'm going to promote the book. But what you get into is you get into different speaking engagements that really they have something to do with the book, but really what it ends up doing is that you're either educating or you're doing patient advocacy. And it's so rewarding. I'm telling you, it is so rewarding. There's a high school teacher where I live that said, it'd be great if you came in and spoke to the staff and then had a session that you'd speak to the students. and I'm going to be doing that. And then there's also speaking engagement with a local addiction center, and all the things that I hear, like from higher up on a national level. It's interesting to go to addiction center and then listen to what they say, and they're on the ground. They're the foot soldiers on the ground. They bring the patients in, and they have to deal with the family members, and they have to deal with everything that goes on. And it's just, it's yeoman work. It's unbelievable to experience that. And those are some of the things that in the future I'm doing more and more of.
That is great because, and by the way, just want to say something. Yeah, I get a lot of folks that come on here with books, and I get all these things with books. Let me just say, the only time I go off with these books is people that you can actually see that is what they're doing. In your stuff here, you can see that this is something you care about, and you're just not plugging a book. You know, there are some people that are just plugging a book, and there are some people that are actually making a material difference in society, and I consider you one of those.
Oh, thank you.
Anyhow, latter question.
Yes.
What didn't I ask you that you wanted me to ask you?
Oh my gosh, I don't know what.
I gave you a heads up.
I know you gave me a heads up. I completely got a blank. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to lead me into that.
Well, anyhow, that's not a problem. I think one of the things that I should have asked you is what's next. Is there another book coming? What's going on?
Oh my gosh, there is another book coming.
There is one coming.
I really want to do. I know you're gonna. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Oh, this is a, and I don't know whether I'm going to do this or not, but I think it needs to be done. Okay. This book is sort of a scolding.
Okay. I want to hear that.
And what it is that this country can be better.
Okay.
And we're not. And there is a lot of areas that we need to do better on. And it's not just politics. It's not just, it's like, when did we stop caring for our own Americans? When did we stop that? When did we stop? And Alberto, this is the number one thing. When did we stop paying attention to what we should do as humans, as Americans in this society? Like, yes, you have a job, but there's more to your job than just doing your job and then clocking out. If you see something, say something. If you see somebody in need, do a kind act during the day. Why not do something as a kind act all the time? You know, I think back to my grandmother and going to church, and you know, I'm going to be a good boy. I'm going to be a good boy. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to be a good boy. But what are you doing Monday through Saturday, right? Right? It's like, yes. I don't mean to preach in that sense, but I think we all could be better if we looked at those, whatever those problems are we have as a country, we can solve those together. That's what I'm thinking of.
Well, you know what, Bruce? That was the answer. And I tell you something else, now that you've said that out loud,
yes,
we're going to hold you to that book, and I'll be, I want to be one of the first ones to interview you when you're done writing that book, because you're a good writer. Author of Cold Comfort, One Man's Struggle to Stop the Illegal Marketing of Powerful Opioid Drugs and Save Lives. Senor Bruce Boyce, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.